next up in our event is Dr. Fio Dossetto. So, Dr. Fio, please join me here on the stage. Uh, Theo works with content to make a difference and serve an audience. She's former senior editor at Hotjar, currently contributing for Ahrefs and Ola, and she runs her own newsletter as well. So, Dr. Theo, it's my pleasure to have you here. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Let's see. Can you wave at me? Okay, so this is starting from the end. I need to slide it all the way back to slide number 1. So don't look at it because it's going to spoil everything. All right. Can you all see my screen and hear me? Can somebody just give me a thumbs up? Yes, wonderful. Okay, so hi, I'm Fio, and I'm going to talk to you about product-led content marketing, which is something I'm really passionate about. I've been practicing for a while, but I also think it's probably one of the most underutilized techniques in B2B content marketing. And so my goal today is to show you what it is, explain why I think you should give it a try, and give you 3 practical methods so you can actually get started at the end of this talk if I've managed to convince you. So first of all, definition. When I talk about product-led content marketing, I'm talking about content pieces like guides or blog posts where your product or service is woven into the narrative and is actively used to illustrate a point, solve a problem, or help your audience accomplish a goal. What I'm not talking about is page formats like landing pages, product announcements, help documentation, etc. These are already traditionally product-led formats. I'm talking more about pieces like these ones, your usual guides to a topic, your deep dives, your educational how-to something pieces, which you tend to see at the sort of top to middle of the funnel. And they're usually dedicated to problem-aware people. And in my experience, these pieces are not receiving a product-led treatment. So what you most often see the traditional way these are executed is something like this. Kind of goes back to what Ryan was showing before. These are really thorough and competent write-ups that give an answer to questions like how does contactless shopping work, or what mistakes do managers make, etc. But nowhere in the execution of this piece do you get to see any product in action. In fact, in one case here on the left, you hear about the company offering a service in the very second to last paragraph of the conclusion. In the example on the right, you don't even know necessarily that there is a company behind the article you're reading. What you get, in fact, is no mention of company at all, of a product or a service, but then you get a link that takes you out to a landing page where you actually realize that the problem you're facing can be solved by a solution these people offer. To be clear, there is nothing particularly wrong with this. I mean, they are, as I said, competent and really thorough write-ups. But in my mind, they have no distinguishing feature. They don't really particularly stand out. They don't give you any lasting impression. And in fact, there is no real practical way of linking them back to a company. Now, compare this kind of execution with this. These are also informational pieces that help you, for example, figure out which marketing KPIs are worth tracking or how to set quotas for your sales team. But the difference in execution here is that in the middle of the narrative, the writer has brought in the product. They've talked about how the product works, what they showed you what it looks like via illustrated screenshots or annotated screenshots. And they kind of given you a sense of how you can solve your problem by using this particular product or this particular sub-feature at this particular time. This is what I mean by product-led content marketing. We're talking about blog posts and guides that do answer the person's initial question, but they also fold in information, illustration, advice, and how-to about the product without breaking the flow and without going into a hard pitch. compared to the previous pieces, you can already see the difference. Here, they're taking things one step further, in that the audience is somewhat already made familiar, not just with the solution, but actually with what the solution in action practically looks like. This is the first reason I'd say why I recommend giving this kind of approach a try, because it supports acquisition. And I said, we normally think of them as belonging to the top or the middle of the funnel, where they help you build awareness, visibility, and they can help you build an audience. But it doesn't mean that you cannot also use them to assist conversion. What you're actually doing here is you're reaching people earlier on in their journey, and you're making aware of your product in a way that your product starts being positioned as the standard solution, starts being perceived as the solution from the very start. So this is the first reason why I would recommend it. And in my experience, there is a lot of value in showcasing your products, because your audience starts getting familiar with it. They see it, but they see it in action in a particular context. So they can imagine themselves using it to do a particular thing at a particular time. I don't know why my face is back. Okay. Okay, so familiar with it, using it at a particular time. Now, I know that I talked about how this helps with acquisition and how this helps with top and middle of the funnel content. But actually, this is where I tell you to sort of forget about the funnel and start thinking instead about the people that you are trying to help, regardless of whether they are customers or not. This is a piece that's this is a kind of execution that supports attention, because just because somebody is already your customer doesn't mean that they're using your product, your feature, or service at 100% of its capability. It doesn't also mean that they know the inside out of your product and they know 100% of its functionality. Some of this content can actually help your existing customers discover things about your product that they didn't know they could do, and they might go in the product and try it for themselves. So this is kind of going against conventional wisdom, according to which every stage of the funnel has a very specific piece attached to it. I'm telling you, in my experience, this kind of content works regardless of you have a potential, a new, or an existing customer. And to me, this is really the best of both worlds, because it allows you to be helpful in a both and scenario, as opposed to having you choose one specific segment that you're focusing on. And the third reason why I think I would recommend that you give it a try is that you're getting an advantage, because not many companies are doing it. This seems to be somewhat of a well-kept secret. And in fact, while you and your competitors are executing the same kind of content, if you give it this particular spin where you bring in your product, your expertise, bonus points to you if you can bring in customer stories and proofs, you prove that this works. You are starting to showcase yourself as the solution from the very start and at all opportunities, while your competitors are not. This gives you an advantage, and do not underestimate that as well. The question now becomes, how do you do it? And I think this is where the fun begins, but this is also where the challenge starts. And I'm going to call it a challenge, because to do this kind of content, you might think to switch your mindset a little bit, and you need to become comfortable with inhabiting different disciplines or wearing multiple hats at the same time. So yes, you are a content marketer and you're running a content marketing program, but you're going to have to learn who your customers are, what their jobs to be done are, what it is that they're trying to achieve. You're going to want to interview your customers, sit in on sales calls, dig through survey data, go through chat logs, anything that takes you close to who they are and what they want to do. You are also, however, going to have to learn how your product really works inside and out, not just so you can write a bullet point list of features that you can add to a piece of content. No, It's so you can learn how a specific piece of functionality works in a specific content, in a specific context, and you can write competent content about it and illustrate it and help your audience really do something with it. It's a complex thing to do, which is why I think not many companies are doing it. So again, you get some advantage if you try. But also, I will add a fourth dimension, which is you're going to have to start thinking about your role and your role in the company, or your role as a freelancer, etc., less in terms of just a content marketer and more in terms of being a CEO or a business owner. By which I mean, most of the time, content marketing programs are measured with the easiest and most visible metric, which is traffic. But traffic that doesn't grow the business is ultimately and potentially not that good of a metric, because it doesn't allow you to show how your work is actually tangibly driving the business forward. Instead, what you want to do is find ways of tying back your efforts to metrics that grow the business. For instance, in our case at Hotjar, it was signups or MQLs, first touch signups or MQLs. Because when you do, and when you know the value of a signup or an MQL, you can then attribute back to your own work and demonstrate how your work has contributed. And the way you do it is not incredibly sophisticated. In fact, let me show you by way of anecdote. Four lines really changed my way of thinking about content marketing. This is a course called Blogging for Business. It's a course that Ahrefs developed back in 2017. It's now free on YouTube if you want to look for it. And I credit this slide with giving me a major aha content marketing moment and really changing the way I understood and practiced content at Hotjar. What you're seeing here is what Ahrefs call a business impact score. And the idea here is that for every piece of content that you create, so for every proposed topic that comes in your pipeline, you try to score it on a scale from 0 to 3. 0 is content where you have no way to mention your product without it looking forced or too pushy. 3, you have the ability to hinge the entire narrative around your product. Your product is a crucial part of the solution. When you start thinking in terms of content like this, you're going to start gravitating towards pieces that are scored towards a 2 or a 3, because these are the ones that are actually bringing, propelling the business forward. And this is where I said you might need a switch in mindset, because pieces that are scored 0 and 1 are usually the ones that build the most traffic. So you're going to want to privilege other things to traffic, and what you lose in traffic potentially you gain back in a better fit with the people that you're doing this content for. So remember this 0-3 business score, because now I'm going to show you how to actually put it in action in your content with 3 methods that you can start following. Method number 1, it's keyword-based. So SEO was our primary method of content distribution at Hotjar. This may also be your case. And if that's the case, then you are familiar with what you're seeing here, which is usually this content starts from keyword research. You're finding relevant keywords, and by relevant, I mean relevant to your company, to your product, but mostly to your customers, their jobs that they need to do, the goals they need to achieve. Now, this is where things change, because normally at this point, you would prioritize your keywords probably by volume, potentially by volume and difficulty, or some other metric. But now instead, you're going to bring in your business impact score. At Hotjar, I called it the Hotjarability factor. And what that meant was that for every piece of content that came my way, I would ask back, how Hotjarable is this on a scale from 0 to 3? Which really meant how much of the narrative can we hinge on the product? How much of the product can we showcase? Do we have any evidence that some customers have done this successfully? something like that. And note that this is not a perfect scientific process. The line between a 2 and a 3 is very flexible. Sometimes it's a 2, sometimes a 3. Different people will think different things. It's fine, because what you're trying to distinguish really is your 0s and your 1s from your 2s and your 3s. And you're parking temporarily your 0s and your 1s, and you're going forward and you're prioritizing your 3s and your 2s. And then you proceed as you normally would, but with what Ryan just said in mind, which is add your unique angle. Just because this is an SEO-driven piece doesn't mean it has to be, and in fact, it shouldn't be a copycat piece or a carbon copy of everything that is already there. This is where you can bring in your own opinion, your controversial take, if you want, the earned secrets that Ryan was talking about. This is where they all come together. These are different ways that you can then weave the product into your narrative. So these are some executions I want to show you. In some cases, I use the see in action box. In some cases, I used an editor's tip sections. In other cases, I just came right out and said, if you're using Hotjar, this is what it looks like. And then there was also an unspoken agreement with our team and our writers that every time we could showcase the product in action and in context, we would do it. So if you go on the Hotjar blog, you will see the product everywhere. But this really works. And in fact, this is the logic behind some of these pieces, which were keyword driven. They rank really well, and they bring good traffic back to Hotjar. In fact, by way of estimate, these pieces by themselves bring about 50,000 views every month back to Hotjar, which is, in my mind, a huge opportunity to showcase yourself as part of the solution, because the people that come following these queries clearly have a problem they need to solve or an action that they want to perform or achieve. And clearly, we, on the other hand, had the perfect solution that intersected with their needs. So why not show it from the very beginning? Which is exactly what we did. And again, let's just go back a second to the idea of traffic as being potentially a bit of a vanity metric. It's all well and good if you're bringing this traffic, but if this traffic doesn't do anything, then why are you even doing it? We measured the success of these pieces less in the traffic that they brought and more in the action that people took after them, and particularly in the way of signups, first touch signups and first touch MQLs. And these, in addition to bringing good traffic, also performed really well. And that's how we could prove that our work was advancing the business forward. Method number 2, forget about SEO for a second, put on a completely different hat. This is where you start interviewing your customers about how they use your product or service, how they do something, what they're trying to accomplish, what's going well, what's not going so well. Because they are using your product, already the Hotjar ability score in this case is a 2 or a 3, which is great because it really intersects your potential and your existing audience's needs. If you can also find, you must find an angle. And if you can also find a keyword. This is an example taken from a piece that we did after a customer of ours told us the exact process they had followed to create user personas with Hotjar. Normally, we could have just ended it at a piece called How to Do User Personas in Hotjar. That would be your usual bottom of the funnel content. It would be absolutely fine, except we try to intersect it with a keyword to give it larger visibility and drive more awareness of our product in the context of a particular situation, which was creating user personas. We also added our own controversial take or our unique angle, which was you don't need to spend masses of money to do user personas. You can do something relatively good and solid in 4 steps without leaving your desk. And again, because we've interviewed a customer, this is a really good example of how you can hinge the entire narrative on the product. You can showcase it in action. You can show the process and the steps that they took to do something, and you can also show the results. Sometimes you cannot find a keyword, no matter how hard you try. And that's fine anyway. This, again, is a trade-off, as I said before, between finding traffic and finding opportunities to showcase your product and bring the business forward. These all came out of conversations that we had with customers. No way to attach a keyword any bigger than maybe 10 or 20 predicted traffic, predicted visits, but that was fine because we used different distribution methods. In this particular case, we used our newsletter. We also made it so that these content notifications would pop up in the dashboard for the product so that customers would actually be able to see them and then take advantage and try to use our product for these specific use cases. And again, this is where you can measure business impact if you want by creating cohorts of customers who have been exposed to this content versus customers who haven't, and see if they behave differently, if their retention is impacted in some way. Third and final method. So far, we talked about existing content, new content. Now we're going to talk about existing content, which I think is where your biggest opportunity lies right now, because you can just go back and look at what you already have and see if you can add a product twist. So this is a company that I don't work for, but I'm a customer of theirs. I quite like the product. And this is how I would do it. I look for successful pieces by whichever metric you define success. In this particular case, I found that some of their blog posts rank really well and bring decent traffic back for some keywords. So I would look for that. And then I would apply the business score. In this case, it's called 15.5. So we'll call it the 15.5 ability of a piece. And we'd ask questions like, can we weave the product in somehow? Can we hinge parts of the narrative on the product? Does it feel natural? Does it add value? In this particular piece, they're talking about employee software management, and they're talking about showcasing public appreciation. I know that they have a really good feature where they can high-five each other in public, and then so colleagues can see people that have been recognized. To me, this gives it a 15.5 ability score of at least 2, because you have a good way of bringing the product in. And if that was me, this is what I would do. So I did it for them. Added a very quick section about how my product does something that is explained in the heading, with a screenshot and the link to the specific landing page that talks about this piece of functionality. That's it. It doesn't have to be a massive rewriting job. But in my mind, this piece is already doing something better than it was before, because now they are already pairing the sort of theoretical but somewhat intangible solution of showing employee appreciation with a very practical and tangible example of how this software does it. And if you were to use the software, you would be able to do it yourself. So that's it about product-led content marketing. To summarize, we talked about what it is. So blog posts and guides where the product or service is woven into the narrative. We talked about 3 reasons to do it, because it supports acquisition and retention, and also because not many people are doing it, so you can get ahead if you start it. And then I've given you 3 methods, 2 for new pieces of content, and 1 for pieces that already exist. I hope this was useful to you. And if it was, if you try it and you have some success, please report back. I write a content newsletter about success stories from practitioners and marketers. So I always love featuring people in it. So if that's you, let me know and let's talk.
Thank you so much, Fio.
You're very welcome.
We have time for questions.
Do I need to stop sharing my screen? Oh, yeah, it's already done.
Done. All right. So, questions. How do you think this approach also works for service businesses, like marketing services, or in what ways might they need to be adapted?
I think it works insofar as you have a service that can help people something. Obviously, software is easier because you can just go and take a screenshot of your dashboard. So it's much easier to do it visually, but it can still work anyway with a service. You're just going to have to be a bit more creative about what you show. So if there are any artifacts or any products that you share with your customers, usually maybe share what that looks like, or remove sensitive data. Yeah, I think it works, but software is obviously a bit more straightforward.
Mm-hmm. Another question here. Would you take a similar approach with the newsletter? delivering an answer to a question of your audience, and bring in your product. This is how you solve the problem.
I think you would. Obviously, you first need to have people sign up to your list. But I mean, why not? Sometimes, when we shared these content pieces at Hotjar, we would explain the context in which they could be particularly used. So yes, it doesn't have to be a blog post or a guide, provided you're trying to serve your audience and give them some suggestions and some help. I don't think it matters exactly where that's happening. So just as long as you're doing it to help, wherever that is, you're good.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Do you find that this can be successful with a subset of your content, not a part of your entire strategy?
Yes. Yes, I think it depends on many factors, such as, for example, how big your content team is, how much bandwidth you have to experiment with other stuff. So in my case, we were 2 people in a very scrappy team that was bootstrapped, so we couldn't really build a big editorial team or anything. So this was, I want to say, maybe 85% of our entire strategy. It doesn't mean that in different conditions and under different scenarios, you could use this as 50, 60% of your strategy. So absolutely, yes.
Do you have data on how dynamic content fares compared to static content? Dynamic content like video or animations?
I do not. I wish I did. I have the feeling that I think it just, again, I'll bring it back to the whole point. Are you trying to help and educate your audience? And if you know that your particular audience consumes video more so than writing, then I'd say video will probably work better for you. I don't know that there are official stats that work across every type of format. I wish I had a better answer than this, but whatever your audience needs, in whichever format you have evidence they need, do it for them.
When do you suggest not to use product-led content strategy?
Ooh, do I suggest not using it? This is, I mean, I think here's the thing. If content marketing is somehow not working for you in general, then product-led content marketing probably will not work for you as well. So in the company I work for right now, our acquisition method is entirely non-dependent from content, which means even if you went with a product-led approach, it probably wouldn't work for acquisition. It might still work for retention, though. So as I give you this answer, I think it always will work, provided you know the reason why you're doing it.
Last question. When measuring content success, how far do you go in terms of looking at the content's influence on signups, MQLs, etc.?
Yes. So in our case, we looked at our content measurements progressed the more sophisticated we became. We started from first touch signups. We continued in first touch MQLs. We then went into multi-touch attribution. I think you can go as far as you want. The question is, should you? Because I don't think you can track everything to perfection. And in fact, you might be spending time trying to track conversions down to the final point, while instead you could be doing something else, aka experiment with new content. I will send in the chat, though, a really good article about tracking results with first touch signups in Google, which are a really good starting point if you're interested in seeing how it's done.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Fio. We will find you online. People have been already sharing your newsletter in the chat here, so everybody go subscribe. Thank you again.
Thank you.